Okay, so we've been holding here in Perek Mem Hey. We're at around Pasuk Chof, but I want to just point out something we've been discussing in the previous Psukim, that there are two sets of instructions. That is to say, in Psukim Yud Zayin, Yud Ches, and then Yud Tes and Chof, those are two sets of instructions that overlap and have some differences. The two sets of instructions are Pare telling Yosef, tell your brothers, here's what you should do: load up your animals and go to the land of Canaan, and take your brothers and your household and come to me, and I'll give you the best of Eretz Mitzrayim, and you'll eat the fat of the land. That's one set. And the second set of this next Psukim, and you are commanded. Now he's commanding Yosef, and he says, do this: take for yourselves from the land of Mitzrayim agolos, wagons for your children and your wives, and carry your father and come, and don't have any pity on your utensils, because the good of Eretz Mitzrayim is yours. So obviously these things closely parallel, but there are some differences, and I made a chart where I lined up the parallels and the differences, and that's here and on top, but now I'll just point them out inside. So the first set of instructions has Emor el hachecha, and corresponding to that, and the second one is Ve'ato tzuvesa. So one is a instruction for Yosef to tell his brothers something, and the second one is specifically a commandment to Yosef. I forgot to mention when we started the shir, this is l'schus, the success of the ongoing current operation that just began against the enemies of Hashem and his people in Iran, and l'schus, the brave soldiers that are waging the war against the evil regime of Iran that seeks to destroy Eretz Yisrael and Am Yisrael, and l'schus, the Toishovei Eretz Yisrael who are currently in Sakana from counterattack. This Torah is given fully, completely to them as a schus. Okay, so the parallels and the differences between two sets of instructions. Emor lachecha or va'atot tzuvesa. In both of them we have zois asu. The first set of instructions says load up your animals, and the second set of instructions is take wagons. The first set of instructions says ulu chuvoyu arzo Canaan, load up your animals and go to the land of Canaan. The second set of instructions also has a land, but it switches it to Eretz Mitzrayim. It says take agolos me Eretz Mitzrayim. Kechulachem me Eretz Mitzrayim agolos, and that parallels ulu chuvoyu arzo Canaan in the first set of instructions. The first set of instructions says take your father and your household. The second set of instructions says l'tapchem and l'sheichem l'sasem v'zavichem. The first set says uvoyu elai. The second has uvasem. Now here's what the second one has. The first one doesn't have. It says ve'einechem al tochos al kalechem. That has no parallel. Don't worry about the kalim that you're leaving behind. That has no parallel. We'll get to that soon. The first set of instructions says ve'etno lachem, I will give you, and the second set of instructions says lachem, who it is yours. The first set says as tuv Eretz Mitzrayim, and the second set has that same expression, ki tuv kol Eretz Mitzrayim. The first set of instructions has ve'ichlu es chelef ha'aretz, which the second has no corresponding parallel thing. So I don't understand fully why it's set up as these two parallel sets. We spoke about some of the differences here. Who is giving the command, who is being commanded. But I want to focus now, we also spoke about the Agolas, now I want to focus on the difference that in the second set of instructions it says the good of Eretz Mitzrayim is yours, lochem, who it is yours. And as I mentioned, the second set has take for yourself me Eretz Mitzrayim, where in the first set there's the instruction to go to the land of Canaan. So we're going to explain that now. First, we're going to read Pasuk Chaf, which says ve'einechem al tochois al kelechem. Very interesting pasuk, very intriguing pasuk that puzzled me for a long time until I think I cracked what's going on over here. So he's telling them, don't worry, don't feel bad about the kalim that you're leaving behind. Why not? Because all the good of Eretz Mitzrayim is yours. So it's okay that you're leaving behind whatever wealth you can transport. You're not bringing everything, because the good of the whole Eretz Mitzrayim is yours. So why is this so important? What's the point of saying this? Don't feel bad about your kalim. It's a very interesting way to say it. What's this all about? Why is this important to mention that there's something about the kelim that they're leaving behind? So, but the pshat is like this, because this is actually an explanation or continuation of the previous pasuk, which is part of the same set of instructions. This set of instructions is telling them what he added, and this is what it's adding. The key addition of the second set of instructions is agolus. He's telling him like this: Paro gave a command to Yosef, take for yourself from the land of Mitzrayim agolus, wagons. Now, what's the purpose of the wagons? To transport. What do you transport in the wagons? He says, L'tapchem v'leneshechem n'sosem esavichem uvosem. Okay, so he's providing them wagons to transport the humans, and that leads to the natural question: what about all our stuff? Why are you telling them? Why are you providing them agolus for taf, noshim, and avichem? Shouldn't you provide sufficient agolus that we could also load up all our costly furniture and utensils? So in order to explain himself, in order to explain that he's only supplying them with agolus for the people, he's not supplying them agolus in sufficient quantity that they'll be able to transport all their precious goods that they own in the land of Canaan, is because that's okay. They shouldn't bother them that they're leaving that behind, because that they'll replace Kituv Kalat Tzayim Lechembu. So therefore, this pasuk is there to address a problem they might have, or a gap in their provisions here. That here he's giving them agolus to bring the people, but why are you not giving me agolus to bring my kelim? So he's saying, well, don't worry about that. It's okay. Put people on agolus. Don't load them up with kelim and risk breaking them or whatever, or don't try to arrange some other means of bringing them the kelim. Just bring the people. No need to bring the kelim, because those are replaceable, and not just that they're replaceable, but they're yours. All the good of Mitzrayim is yours. It doesn't matter. So really, what we're supposed to notice in this pasuk, one thing we can notice in this pasuk, not the only thing, is that the Einchem al tochos al kalechem, the kelim should not be the objects of our chisayon, of our care and concern, but rather the people should be. The people are the only ones that we don't want to leave anyone behind. Okay, so we'll get to that in a moment. First, I want to point out that this pasuk about don't worry about kelim, because all the good of Mitzrayim is in your hands, is foreshadowing that they're going to leave Mitzrayim with klei chesef and klei zohav and smolos, because here he tells them, don't worry about your kelim, ki tuv kalat tzayim lochem hu. And the next thing we know, Yosef gives them chalifos smolos, and when they leave Mitzrayim, they borrow vayishalu b'Mitzrayim klei chesef u klei zohav u smolos. So that's following this theme of Mitzrayim, the tuv of Mitzrayim being theirs. Okay, so that takes us to the Exodus, to leaving Mitzrayim. Meaning to say, this pasuk is foreshadowing what Bnei Yisrael are going to take, or going to get from Mitzrayim. And it's saying, as we mentioned, don't worry about the kelim, those you're going to take from here, but rather you should worry about the people. On those you should be chos. Your ayin should be chos. So the theme that it's important for the ayin to be chos on people, and its connection with Yitzias Mitzrayim, because as we said, the kelim are not to be the object of your chos, because you're going to take them from Mitzrayim, and they did take them from Mitzrayim when they left. But the people, it's important to be chas on the people. You have to care about the people, because you can't replace people, you can't leave them behind. This takes us to Yechezkel Perek Tes Zayin Pasuk Hey, which says that when Bnei Yisrael's time came to leave Mitzrayim, they were like a baby that was sitting there and wallowing in its blood, and unwashed, etc. No one had pity on you. But then Hashem saw, forever alayech, Hashem saw, and Hashem was chos on you. It says elsewhere in Yechezkel too, that, I think it says elsewhere in Yechezkel, but not specifically about Yetzias Mitzrayim, that's the thing. Okay, that when there was time to leave Mitzrayim, the problem was, nobody cared about you. So here we have that Parah saying, come to Mitzrayim, I care very much about the people, but don't care about the Kalim, because those you're going to take from Mitzrayim. And indeed, when they left Mitzrayim, they took the Kalim. Okay? But how did they get out of Mitzrayim? Because someone cared about the people. But actually, nobody cared about them. There was nothing to be care about then. They were in such a terrible state. But only Hashem came and was chos aleim ayin. And notice this then ties in to the Yetzias Mitzrayim when they indeed received Klei Chesed v'Klei Zav v'Smolas. There it says, Vayiten Hashem es chein ha'am be'enei Mitzrayim, vayashilom v'yinatzos Mitzrayim. So the point is like this. Number one, the chein, they needed chein in the enei Mitzrayim. That's critical, because the people have to be respected. The people have to be valued. Once the people are valued, then the kalim follow, which is exactly what's happening over here. As long as we're chos ayin on the people, we're going to give them tuv kol ha'etz Mitzrayim. We'll work for them, we'll produce for them. And as long as at the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim is going to be chein, then the people will get out and the people will take tuv ha'etz Mitzrayim. But as we said, the people don't have chein when they left Mitzrayim. Only Hashem was chos ayin on them. Similarly, vayitin Hashem es chein ha'am, meaning to say it was like a supernatural thing. Really, there wasn't much to be choinein, but there was a special, divine chein that came from Hashem, who was chos ayin. Okay, so now we understand why. So I said before that in the parallel psukim, and now I want to just walk that back a bit, that even though they're parallel psukim in some ways, there is one particular theme that the second set of psukim is adding, which is the agolis, and everything follows the agolis. Now we understand that. Which has no parallel in the first psukim, is a very simple reason, because as we explained, this is all about what he is giving them agolis for and what he's telling them leave behind. I am not giving you agolis to carry your couches and pianos, because that you'll just take from Mitzrayim. Okay. And that's why it says, Kichulachem me'eretz Mitzrayim agolos. And as I mentioned, this is a variation in the second set of instructions from the first one, which is he puts in the word me'eretz Mitzrayim, because the point is as follows. Since he's putting at their service agolos me'eretz Mitzrayim, that itself is a reason why he doesn't have to give them agolos for the kalim. Because he's telling them like this, I'm giving you agolos to carry your people. But your kalim, don't worry about it, because everything good in Mitzrayim is at your service, is yours. Just like I'm giving you agolos, which are tov ha'etz Mitzrayim. The very fact that he's giving them agolos, me'eretz Mitzrayim, implies that tov kol ha'etz Mitzrayim lochem hu, and therefore don't worry about your kalim. And why is it say lochem hu? It is yours, because his point is like this. His point is that Yosef could say, I'll give you this, I'll give you that, I'll promise you things. But Paroi can actually transfer ownership. And by saying Lochem, he's saying there's no need. There's no need to worry about your kalim, because these are yours. So it's like it's not just come here and I'll take care of you. It's that you're not losing anything by leaving things behind, because you have a wealth of things in, you have tremendous wealth in Mitzrayim. It's already yours. I made it yours. I made it yours, and that's because these agolis are coming. As we said, it's all rooted in the giving of the agolis, which the pasuk stresses al pi parei, the next pasuk. That's Chaf Aleph, and that means parei was writing it over, giving something over to them, declaring it theirs, making them owners of something in Mitzrayim. And once he makes them owners of something in Mitzrayim, then they no longer care about the kalim that they're leaving behind, because they have so much wealth in Mitzrayim. Okay, so that's the vart. They have so much wealth in Mitzrayim. They don't have to worry about, they don't have to be chas ayin on what they left behind. They do have to be chas ayin on the people. This is foreshadowing the wealth that they're going to, in fact, empty out Mitzrayim, take the klei chesed, klei zav v'smolos. That itself is going to happen when there's a chanina of ayin on the people from Hashem, and they're going, as it says in Yechezkel, and the people are going to also have a chanina in the eyes of Mitzrayim, where they're going to give them that wealth. So as long as you have the chanina of the people, the material wealth follows. People are what's important, and the two verses time can come next. So notice like this. The pasuk has two parts. They did it, and Yosef gave them agolas al pifar. So they did it. I would say is going back on the commandment of Yosef to them, Koy Amar Bincha Yosef, Redoy La'el Tamid, all that, plus the first set of instructions here, which was Yosef telling them what to do, Emor Lachecha Zoisasu, and Vayitel Am Yosef Agolas al pifar is Yosef fulfilling the second set of instructions, which is Yosef Pari commanding him what to do. So that's why Vayasu Chaim B'nei Yisrael, which is like a lashon we use in the when they follow a commandment from Hashem, is appropriate because Koy Amar Bincha Yosef, and he's speaking for Hashem, and they heeded his divine instruction. While when it comes to the Agolos, it doesn't say Vayasu Chaim B'nei Yisrael. That's separate because number one, that's not Yosef giving them instruction. That's Paro giving Yosef instruction. That's Paro giving Yosef instruction, so therefore it's not Vayasu Chaim B'nei Yisrael. They didn't heed anything. Rather, it's Yosef did something, and and also it wouldn't say Vayasu Chaim B'nei Yisrael because it was al pi pari. Al pi pari implies something imperfect about it, while Koy Amar Bincha Yosef is like Koy Amar Hashem. He speaks in the name of Hashem, so they listen to that. Vayasu Chaim B'nei Yisrael. It's like they're doing a mitzvah. But that which happens al pi pari, it doesn't say this expression Vayasu Chaim B'nei Yisrael, which is evocative of mitzvahs. Instead, it says Yosef did something al pi pari. Okay. Now, he gave them also, as we mentioned earlier, the fact that it says agolas al pi pari is because here's a transfer of wealth over here. He's giving them agolas because pari is the one who could say they're yours. They're yours. This thing, which is an important asset in Mitzrayim, it takes pari to transfer it and say his land is theirs. Vayitel tzed laderech. Okay, we had this. We had once before tzed laderech in Parshas Miketz. I don't see it right now. Okay, not important. Just want to point it out. Now let's look at the next pasuk. Lechulam nosan lo ish chalifa ismalei. So he gave them provisions for the road. To each of them he gave, to each person, chalifa ismalei is a change of clothing, or question what that means. Levinyamin nosan shalosh me'es kesef v'chamesh chalifa ismalei. Ulaviv shalach kizes esach amim noisim mitu mitzrayim be'esar nois nois is bar v'lechem mozin la'adoich v'yishalach esach v'yilech v'yiv'lanim v'tiguz b'dech. Okay. So, in a very important diak here, Pasuk of Aleph ends, he gave them tzed laderech, and then Pasuk of Beis begins, to each of them he gave. And this seems like it's a continuation, because it doesn't say that he gave them tzed laderech, and he gave them also clothing for each person, a suit, and Binyamin 5, and 300 kids. Rather, it sounds like that this Pasuk is an explication of the previous one. No, there's the previous Pasuk, and it says he gave them tzed laderech. And now the pasuk gives us some detail, like explaining what was the tzed laderech that he gave. He gave tzed laderech to each of them. He gave to each person chalivas mos, and Binyamin he gave 300 kesef and 5 chalivas. The problem with this is that we don't think of that as tzed laderech. Tzed laderech, I think, means, for good reason, provisions for the journey. Why does Binyamin need shlosh me'es kesef? And why do they need chamesh chalifa smolas? Why Binyamin need chamesh chalifa smolas? And they need one. What does that have to do with tzed laderech? And really, you could just ask the question, just the obvious question: what's the significance of this? Why is this here? Why is he giving this to them now? Okay, he can give, if he wants to give gifts, he can give it when they come back. What's this about? But even, in other words, even if you wouldn't say, look, this is a continuation of tzed laderech, it begs explanation what the significance of these gifts are and why at this juncture is giving them gifts when he's sending them home. So that suggests that it is part of the trip. It has something to do with the derech, which I think is what the simple reading of the continuation of Chav Beis to Chav Aleph suggests, that tzed laderech, and this is the tzed laderech. So I want to read it as this is in fact the tzed laderech. Now, how is it tzed laderech? So there's a big focus on the derech in these psukim. He gives them tzed laderech. That's the end of pasuk Chav Aleph, and then it says Chav Beis what he gave them. Pasuk Chav Gimel says what he gave his father ladarech, And pasuk of Dalet says he sent them away and said, "Al tirgezu b'derech." So let's start backwards. Okay, let's start from pasuk of Dalet. What's the big instruction of Yosef to the brothers, or the blessing? Al tirgezu b'derech. Okay. So just one word on what ragaz means. I always thought it meant don't get angry. I think that's what Rashi says here. But truth is that Mashbam, Ramban talk about this, that the root Reish Gimel Zayin in Tanakh, actually maybe only in Oshna Kodesh, I think in Aramaic in Tanakh it means something else, but the point is it means to be not angry but afraid. Okay, so that's what Ramban says, it means don't be afraid. Right? Rashbam says it also, but really it's a little more complicated than that, because the way to put this all together is that Rogaz, as we shall see soon, Rogaz means to quake. So the earth moves, Argiz Horim. So any time a person is in a heightened state of negative emotion, whether it's he's quaking in fear or he's shaking in anger, that's called Rogaz. So he's telling them that he wants things to be calm. Okay? Rogaz is the opposite of calmness. Rogaz v'chsochak ve'inochas, it says somewhere. Okay? So Rogaz is a state of agitated emotion. Okay. Now, so it's important to Yosef that this trip not have Rogaz. Contrast this to Amos Perikhes, Pasuk Ches, which follows. Of course, we've been looking at Amos very often. And this pasuk, Perikhes Pasuk Ches, follows on the heels of the psukim that decry those who take advantage of the Evyoin and sell him. Well, okay, selling him is more explicit on this Perek Beis, but remember these psukim already that. Right, in Amos Perek Beis it says Al Michron B'Kesef Tzadik Ve'Evyud Ba'avur Na'aloyim, and here in Amos Perek Ches it says Lash B'S Aniyei Oretz Liknois B'Kesef Dalim Ve'Evyud Ba'avur Na'aloyim. But Kitzur Amaisa always is upset at the brothers taking advantage of Yosef and abusing him, but he's also upset at another kind of abusing the poor, which is manipulating and monopolizing the grain markets and waiting for the prices to go up till you make your grain available to the poor. Mapal bar. Okay? So he's upset. I'll read that pasuk. Liknois ba'kesav dalim ve'evim ba'avur na'aloim mapal bar nashbir. So this is, as we've discussed, there's plenty of blame to go around. The brothers did something to Yosef that is an indication of a lack of das Hashem. Yosef passed that on to the Mitzrayim by taking advantage of them. Of course, the brothers had their reasons. Of course, Yosef is the employee of Pare, as we've discussed. So, okay. But the fact is that this is a real problem. And the Navi continues and says, Nishba Hashem b'goyin Yaakov eshkach l'netzach kol ma'aseh. I will not forget this. Ha'al zois l'sirgaz ha'oretz va'oval koyeshiv bo va'ol soch ha'or kula v'nigush v'nishka'ah ki or mitzchoyim. Will the earth not shake for this kind of actions, and all those who dwell in it will be in mourning? And just like the river of Egypt comes up and muddies, so too the whole earth will become muddy. Okay. So working backwards here, it's important to Yosef that there not be roiges. Now we see from the pasuk in Amos that there's and by the way, that's why I mentioned that roiges means to tremble, because also sir gaz aretz doesn't mean the earth is not going to get angry or afraid. It means shake, as it says for all soch arkul. It's going to be like some sort of quaking, or I don't know, shift in the earth's surface. Okay, so the Navi says that there's lots of cause for roiges, for instability, emotional instability, turmoil, let's say. Right? A lot of cause for turmoil. And what's the cause for turmoil? That people sell someone for money, or people abuse the poor in their country to exploit them, and they exploit them, and they try to exact high prices for their grain. Okay. So, leaving out that second part for a minute, which is Yosef's sin, let's talk about the first thing, which is that the brothers, they sell the poor person for money, and that leads to Regez. So Yosef is saying, now plugging that back into our parsha, Yosef says, Al Tirguz B'dech, he says like this: we've gone through a lot of Regez in these years because of the exploitation and the abuse that you've treated me with. And that leads to Regez, that leads to turmoil. Now I want that to end. I want this trip home to be earthquake free. I want calmness to now prevail. So, okay, so that's the idea over here. So now let's read these psukim in light of that. That Al Tirgzu B'dech means Yosef is saying like this: we had our rocky last 20 years, and things have been very, I'm sure there's a lot of turmoil in the family, and because of bad things that were done, and that's called Regez, and I want that Regez to end for this trip. I want this trip to be Nachas, the opposite of Regez. Why? I don't know. Let's not worry about that now. But it's important that the Derech be without Regez. Now, how do we write all the causes for Regez? What was the cause for Regez? So therefore, at this point, Yosef says, I need to restore balance in the family. The balance of the fact that some of you sold me for kesef, most of you, 10 out of 11 of you, I want to restore balance. And the way I'm going to restore balance so that there's no longer Regez. I want to make it like we're moving past, we are acknowledging what we did wrong, and we are no longer holding anything against each other. And the way I'm doing that is by giving Binyamin shloish me'es kesef. You sold me for kesef, and as the pasuk says, that's a cause for Regez. Hal zois le'sirgaz oretz. Hal zois le'sirgaz ha'oretz. So, because you sold me for kesef, we have to write the balance of the kesef that is owed to me by you, or that you took. I don't know if you owe it, but it's kesef that you came onto unjustly, to say the least. So therefore, you have to show that you don't own it. And Binyamin, on the other hand, is innocent, and therefore he earned shloish me'es kesef, which people say, by the way, shloish me'es kesef is 10 times the price of an eved. Kesef shloishim shkolim yitin la'adoinov. So different ways to make the cheshbon that they each owe Yosef that amount or something. Binyamin doesn't. Different ways to do that. But Akapanim, I would say they had a problem with kesef. We discussed this a lot. And Yosef is now trying to restore balance by depriving them of a certain kesef and giving it to Binyamin, the one who is blameless regarding the kesef and righteous regarding the kesef. Okay. Now, we'll get to the Khalifa Smala soon. Yeah, let's get to that soon. How that's solving the problem. But I first want to note that, okay, as we said, Amr says there's another cause for Regez, which is the way Yosef manipulates the bar. So when he sends to his father these displays of wealth, the Asara Chamarim and the S11, which of course is the display of great wealth and Tov Mitzrayim, and we've noticed already that Eser and Oisher, so it's 10 of Chamarim, 10 of Asoinis is a good number to show Oisher, wealth, and Tov Mitzrayim. He sends him bar and lechem and mazon. These are all the different types of foodstuffs that Yosef is controlling and manipulating the prices of, as we discussed. So he is introducing Regez here. In other words, Yosef is trying to avoid the Regez, but it's not so simple. And the proof is he says, Al Tirgzu B'dech. He has to tell him not to. Because even though he's trying to right their evil and deal with that, but he has his own evil, which is indicated by his own ill-begotten wealth. Okay. Now, I want to show you something interesting. I think it's interesting. No, it's very interesting. because Amos talks about what causes the earth to tremble, and so does Mishlei Perek Lamed Pasuk Chaf Aleph. Tachas sholish rog za'aretz. There are three things that make the earth tremble. V'sachas arba l'suchal seis. And there's four. This is like a formulaic kind of thing. 3 for this, 4 for that. That it cannot bear. Now, by the way, the word seis, we also, it comes up here, the Asach HaMerim Noisim, and the Asach HaMerim Noisim, and we spoke about a lot of the Mas. And what are those 4 things? 3 that are 4. Tachas eved ki yimloich v'novel ki is balochem tachas nuah ki si ba'el v'shtivcha ki si v'ashki v'yotah. Eved ki yimloich, Yosef was an eved, became a melech. Novel ki is balochem, he's busy with the lochem. I don't know why he's a novel or if he's a novel. Tachas nuah ki si ba'el, we have this whole debate between Leah and Rachel. And shivcha ki si v'ashki v'yotah is maybe that Yosef becomes the melech instead of Yehuda, who should be the melech. This whole debate in the beginning of Vigash, who's the king. So, what's the point? The point is, Tachas Eved Ki Yimloch, the whole point of these things is that there are certain things that people attain without truly earning, without truly deserving. And when someone attains something without deserving it, that causes the earth to tremble. So Yosef here is in the position of power. He's the Eved Ki Yimloch, and he was Savei Alechem. But, what? He's in this position of power, but maybe he doesn't belong there, and he's trying to tamp down the Reiges, but the very fact that he's king and not quite worthy of it, maybe. I'm saying maybe because that's not something we found before, that he wasn't worthy, but at least that he's working for Mitzrayim. I don't know. I'm not sure if that ties into him being an Eved Ki Yimloch. In other words, what I see in Mishlei is that something about a person who attains something, a level that he's not worthy of, that we haven't found by Yosef. On the contrary, we found that he developed himself and became worthy. So, I'm not sure how that connects, but that he's trying to take care of the Reiges, but he has a Reiges that he introduces himself with the bar. Okay, now going back to the Smolais. So the question is, where do the 5 Smolos come in? So obviously we could also think about that in terms of him writing the relationship between Binyamin and them, but in that case he gave each of them 1 and Binyamin 5. So it's mashma that he wants to give them, it's not just that he wants to change the balance, but rather he wants to give them 1. So we could say simply that that's about the travels, because when a person travels, his clothing gets worn out. So they need new clothing for their travels. Binyamin is going to travel really in style. He gets 5 sets of new clothing. And perhaps, as we noticed, the pasuk in Omer says that they sold the tzaddik for kesef and alayim, and famously they bought shoes with the money that they sold Yosef for. So it's like this. When you travel, you'd have to have clothing and shoes. Binyamin is going to travel in style, so that his travels should be, so it all connects to the derech. Binyamin is going to travel in a way that he is doesn't suffer from the derech, as will they, but they only get 1, not 5, because they have those na'alayim they sold Yosef for, so they're better positioned for a derech as it is. So he's again restoring balance between Binyamin and them. Okay, now what about this Kizais in Pasuk Chav Gimel? So what the word Kizais means is like a bunch of different pshatim in the Mefarshim. How to explain that word Kizais? I don't want to go into that, but I want to point out a medrash, as it were, because in Amos it says Ha'al Zois L'Sir Gaz Aretz. Ha'aretz. Wouldn't Zois cause the Aretz to be Reiges? So now we can read it like this. Yosef is trying to establish this kind of balance between his brothers to correct the Reiges by giving the Shlosh Mias Kesef to Binyamin, as it says in Pasuk Beis. But meanwhile, he's introducing a Reiges of his own, because he's giving the bar, the somewhat ill-begotten bar, that he used Mitzri kind of tactics to enrich Parai. So he's introducing a new Reiges by sending that on the road. So Aviv Shalach Gezais, the Gezais in the Medrash of Navi, it's like this. It's like Yosef is sending something else, but the thing that he's sending is also like the first thing, and it's like it in a negative way, in the opposite way rather, that Same way he's giving back, he's depriving the brothers of wealth because they don't deserve it, but to his fathers he sent a similar wealth quantity. This is also similar to the first one, and the pasuk is drawing the parallel because just like the first one is wealth that they don't deserve, the second, and therefore Yosef deprives them of it, the second one is also wealth that he doesn't deserve, but yet he doesn't realize that, so therefore he's, by sending it, he's still dabbling in Reiges and turmoil. People, the nachas has not yet returned. Okay? The nachas has not yet returned. There's a pasuk Yeshaya which we have to look into more about the day that Hashem gives us rest. I think that's used to refer to the end of Shibud Mitzrayim. So of course this is all about Avdus and Nachas, and that's what we're looking for. But ultimately, right, Yosef is looking to have to avoid the Avdus in Mitzrayim, but the Maisa, there is an element of Avdus in this. You read it in Mitzrayim, and no Nachas. Okay, something to look into. To understand better the significance of the Reiges is because this is all about the question of whether the descent to Mitzrayim will have an element of suffering, or will it be all good, all easy. Okay, now very importantly, we're talking about the descent to Mitzrayim. This derech that Yosef wants to be smooth and pleasant is the derech. It's a very important derech. It's the derech that we were warned against. Okay, so this is not a simple derech that is a pleasant derech, and Yosef is trying to make it into something that maybe it isn't. Okay, so let's look at Yeshai. Yeshai is very opposed to going down to Mitzrayim for aid. Going down to Mitzrayim for aid means, well, Mitzrayim is wealthy, and when there's problems, whatever the political situation was then, people would tend to think that Mitzrayim can help, and Yeshai is very opposed to this. So of course, this is why we're looking at a lot of Yeshaya, Perek Tes, and Lamed for this theme of going down to Mitzrayim for aid. And take a look at Yeshaya Perek Lamed. Whoa, there he says, right, Perek Lamed Pasuk Vav, Masa Bahamis Negev. So there's animals going down to the south and bearing a Masa. We spoke about this Masa. And these are animals carrying wealth to Mitzrayim. Basically, it's like we had, starting in Parshas Vayeshev, Gmaleim Noisim, there was a major trade of spices going down to Mitzrayim in order to access the riches of Mitzrayim. But the Navi says, and you go through dangerous deserts, Mitzrayim Hevel Varik Ya'azayru, Mitzrayim's aid is Hevel Varik. So he doesn't like Mitzrayim's help. L'chein l'karas l'zois Rahav Heim Shabbos. So it's Rahav. Okay, I'll explain to you why I'm focusing on Rahav in a minute. But this business of going down to Mitzrayim for help, you don't want to go down to Mitzrayim for help. We spoke about Yeshaya Perek Lamed a lot. Instead, there's the right derech to go. You need to hear it from Hashem, and there's the wrong derech. The wrong derech is thinking Mitzrayim could help you. I just want to point out there, we're going into the pasukim. Perek Lamed Pasuk Chof Gimel talks about Hashem will make it rain, and the Ayorim, which is another word for donkeys, Ayor ben Chamor, it says in Tzchaya, will have enough food. So here, Yosef sends Asoinis and Ayorim. Okay, you know what? That's a little bit probably won't be understood. Let's skip that. But I want to point out now that in Yeshaya Perek Lamed, so again, Yosef is saying, look, there's a lot of wealth. You can come down to Mitzrayim without Reiges. And Yeshaya Perek Lamed says, the wealth of Mitzrayim is not so interesting. It's not dependable, and they're called Rahav. Now that word Rahav appears in Yeshaya Perek Gimel as well. Yeshaya Perek Gimel talks about that there's not going to be any leaders. Instead, the Ne'orim, the youth, are going to lead Yerushalayim. And people are going to tell someone else, Simla lecha, Kotz and Tiyelon. You have the Simla, and therefore you should be our leader. I'm not sure what that means, but we see an association between the Simla and being a leader. And the person's going to say, no, I don't want to be a leader. Okay, fine. And there it says, so we're not going to have leaders. Instead, we're going to have youth leading the people. Yirhavu hanar bezokin. So the nar is going to be Rahav in the zokin. So Yirhavu is something like chutzpah, that the Nahar claims to have power but really is impotent or something like that, or it shouldn't be ruling. So Yosef, who's the Nahar and became the king, and he's proud of the wealth of Mitzrayim, he thinks he's going to show it to Yaakov, and really that wealth, and therefore show that the derech is a safe derech, there's no reges, but really that derech, really that wealth involves reges. Really the wealth of Mitzrayim is Rahav, and the Nahar leading the Zaken is an element of chutzpah. So Yosef telling Yaakov what to do, as it were, is an element of misplaced confidence or power. And another thing is that this story about the simla indicating kingship suggests, like Chazal say, that the simla that Yosef gave to Binyamin is an allusion to the Lavush Malchus he's going to wear in Megillas Esther. Because the question is, so again, now where does kingship come in? Because Yosef is saying, I'm worthy of being king and so is Binyamin my brother, but you guys are not. And by doing that, he's trying to right the balance here, or right the wrongs of the questions, but really there is an element where it's not true, because Yosef as king is also not the greatest king because of what he did to Mitzrayim. So basically the point is that Yosef is giving them Tzeda Laderech indeed, but the significance of Tzeda Laderech is not merely that's going to keep them alive on the derech, but rather he wants the derech, the road down to Mitzrayim, he wants that to be a derech salula, a derech of nachas. He wants it symbolically and meaningfully to be a derech that can be undertaken in comfort, because that will set the tone for the descent to Mitzrayim. But really, and this is the derech of, as we said, the derech that we're never supposed to take back again. And really that derech involves some element of reges that Yosef is trying to avoid, but cannot help but bring in some reges, because he himself is in the position of king who shouldn't be king, and maybe is utilizing the power of Mitzrayim, which is not so kosher itself, and is actually Rahav. It's actually insolent. Okay, once again I reiterate, the all schus of this Torah, of my learning this Torah, of my teaching this Torah, of you listening to Torah, should go straight and completely to those who are doing the good fight, risking their lives, and taking death to those who need to be extirpated and removed from this earth to make it into a better place, and to the schus of the protection of Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael, Shomer Yisrael, Shmer She'ez Yisrael, V'al Yovad Yisrael, Ha'im Shema Yisrael, Shomer Goy Echad, Shmer She'ez Am Echad, V'al Yovad Goy Echad, Am Yachad, Im Shmucha Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Shomer Goy Kadosh, Shmer She'ez Am Kadosh, Al Yovad Goy Kadosh, Mashalash, Masholosh, Kedusha, Kadosh, Mitzrat Tzibirach, Mitzvah Yisach, Mitzvah Tzibis, Bayes, Ador, Anikein, Zer, Binu Makinu Chalinu, V'anikinu, Masam Sakhasim, Mitzvah Mitzvah, Rishi Einu.